Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah Johnson, and I am the co-director of the UCSD Black Studies Project. It is a great pleasure to welcome Fred Kudjo Kuwornu to UCSD as part of the year-long series on Black Europe, co-sponsored by the Black Studies Project and European Studies. This is a new initiative, and we hope you will join us for the many exciting events we have lined up for every quarter. Our inaugural event is a series of conversations with Mr. Kuwornu, an award-winning filmmaker, activist, producer, and educator. Even a sketch of his extensive professional biography demonstrates how fortunate we are to have him here with us. Born and raised in Bologna, he is currently based in Brooklyn, New York, where he runs his production company, Do the Right Films. He started his career as a DJ and producer, and then worked as a TV show writer for Italian public television. After his experience working with the production crew of Spike Lee's film Miracle at Santa Ana, Mr. Kuwornu researched the story of the 92nd Infantry Buffalo Soldiers Division, named after the earlier 19th century division, an African-American segregated combat unit that fought in Europe, particularly in Italy during World War II. He collected the experiences of many of the 92nd Infantry veterans in a very moving film where you can see interviews with them. This resulted in the award-winning documentary that he produced and directed, Inside Buffalo, which won Best Documentary at the Black Berlin International Cinema Festival. He later directed a film which examines issues of race, ethnicity, and national identity in 21st century multicultural Italy. It includes interviews with 18 young men and women born in Italy to immigrant parents who have attended Italian schools, speak Italian, and see themselves as Italian. However, they are not Italian citizens due to the current law. The film won the 2012 Ilaria Alpi Prize and has been the focus of intense conversations in schools, cultural associations, and other platforms throughout the country. In 2016, he released a documentary, I love this title, Blaxploitalian, 100 Years of Blacks in Italian Cinema. Mr. Kuwornu has taught courses on production and digital filmmaking in the Black diaspora and contemporary Italy and Europe at universities all over the world, and he is the founder of Teaching Black Italy, a collective of scholars, artists, and activists. During his visit to campus, he will also be presenting his work on Black Lives Matter, the Black Lives Matter movement in Italy, and the legacy of colonialism. I'm now pleased to introduce Uli Strasser, co-director of European Studies, who we have been working very extensively together all year on this new series. And she will in turn introduce Dean Cristina Della Coletta, a distinguished professor of Italian literature, who will be doing our interviews this afternoon.
Hello and welcome everyone. I'm Ulrike Strasser. I'm the co-director for European Studies and Italian Studies. And I want to echo Sarah Johnson's excitement about this series that we are launching with Fred Kuwornu's visit to our campus. It will be going on at least for 1 year, if not more, and it's entitled Black Europe, and we hope you will be tuning back in for more. It's my pleasure now to introduce to you our Dean, Cristina Della Coletta. She was appointed Dean of the Division of Arts and Humanities at UC San Diego in August 2014. As Dean, she holds the Chancellor's Associate's Chair in Italian Literature. Prior to her arrival at UC San Diego, Della Coletta served as Associate Dean for Humanities and the Arts in the College and Graduate School of Arts and Sciences at the University of Virginia, where she was also a professor of Italian. She holds a laurea in Lingue e Letterature Straniere from the Università di Venezia, Italy, and a master's degree in Italian from the University of Virginia. She earned her PhD in Italian from UCLA in 1993. Cristina Della Coletta's research and teaching interests include historical fiction, Italian cinema and film adaptation, women's and cultural studies, and the use of technology in the humanities. She is the author of the following books: When Stories Travel, Cross-Cultural Encounters Between Fiction and Film; World's Fair Italian Style, The Great Expositions in Turin and Their Narratives; and Plotting the Past, Metamorphosis of Historical Narrative in Modern Italian Fiction. In addition to her administrative duties, she is completing a digital project titled Turin 1911, the World's Fair in Italy, which has led to collaboration with the UC San Diego Jacobs School of Engineering and the Politecnico di Torino in Italy. I now turn it over to our speakers.
Thank you, Professors Johnson and Strasser. It is my honor and privilege to be here today to spend some time with our guest, Fred Kudjo Kuwornu. It's an honor to have you, Fred. I hope you don't mind if I call you Fred. And as a first step, this interview will be in English, but you needed to allow me to begin by saying, Fred, benvenuto,
Grazie,
benvenuto
grazie mille.
a San Diego. Benvenuto all'Università della California San Diego, è un piacere averti qui, non solo come Dean della divisione di Arts and Humanities, ma soprattutto come italianista che si interessa moltissimo di film e della rappresentazione dell'Italia in un contesto globale. Quindi è davvero un piacere essere parte di questo gruppo oggi. Without further ado, then I will get started in English. And my first question for you, Fred, is this. Why do you create documentary films? What are the elements of this particular genre, the documentary, that attract you as a filmmaker, but obviously and also as an activist?
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me inside this wonderful and wholesome conversation. Basically, I jump into the career of documentarian by chance. As Sarah mentioned in my bio, I started as a DJ. I attended at political science as education. Then I work in television as a television writer. It was only after an experience that I had with Spike Lee in the film Miracle at Santa Ana that I decided to start to produce and direct my first documentary that was Inside Buffalo. And doing this documentary gave me the awareness that this was a great career for me, because it was a career in which I could try to work internationally. And Inside Buffalo was the first documentary in which also experienced to tell the story about a part of the global diaspora, the global Black diaspora, in particular a story of African-American experience in World War II in Italy. The following documentary was a documentary in which I try to tell another story, the story of those who were not Italian citizens, in particular a generation of sons of immigrants. This was my first work in which I understood how powerful is documentary filmmaking in tell in some way your own story. And tell your story basically became for me a motto as a filmmaker, because documentary allow you much more to a lot of different segments of the society to tell their stories without mediation or interference in some cases by a huge production that are in many cases interested much more in fiction film.
And I think that is particularly meaningful because you mentioned Spike Lee and Miracolo a Sant'Anna. And that is a hugely epic film, certainly a historical film, but built around a grandiose set with great epic component, and I suppose an enormously expensive budget. And then your documentary really goes to the core, or the individual stories, the stories of the people with their own voices. And my question here is, do you see yourself as part of a community of documentary makers in Italy that have similar aspirations and goals? And I said Italy, but really at this point we should say in Italy and elsewhere.
Yeah, actually, thank you for this question, Cristina. I learned a lot in the United States, especially 10 years ago, in the United States, they were raising a movement of filmmakers of documentary that were engaged in social change. So they consider their work and they consider their documentaries not just an audiovisual product to send at a film festival and maybe win a film festival, but they consider their work as a tool to use for social campaign. Actually, when I made 18 Years Solid, I made this documentary trying to imitate and to be inspired by other Californian, in particular, a filmmaker who made a documentary that is amazing called Made in LA. I think that a generation of documentarians in Italy who are trying right now to understand how powerful are the documentary as a tool for doing social change are raising the last 3-4 years. Because of course, for doing that, you have to associate your work or your idea with association or community activists, and so engaging different environment of the society, the documentary can be a powerful tool to change the mind of many people in a nation.
So if we are thinking about changing the minds of people, we think about the future. So before I get into the specifics of your individual documentaries, I wanted to pick your brain on your view of the future of the documentary as a genre, especially in light of the audience and reach and the opportunities provided by the internet and social media.
Yeah, social media changed a lot the scenario of also the industry. Until the social media, also a filmmaker of documentary, even doing documentary is less expensive than doing a film. So allow to independent filmmaker at least to start their own production with their own budget. They can also try to figure out how to shoot a documentary with a low budget. But until the rise of the social media, by the way, was difficult because many filmmakers were waiting to close some deal with some distribution or have the opportunity to show their works. So they were really not motivated to start it immediately. Right now it's different because, you know, if even you have a low budget, you know that you can have a potential audience. So in the moment that you realize that you have a low budget, but you have the story, is the moment that you need to start to produce your story. And then you can have an audience. And then sometimes you can start with the social media audience, and then this audience can enlarge after some weeks or some months that you release your work. So for this reason, social media changed a lot in terms of giving to independent filmmaker the power and the awareness that when you are ready to go.
Excellent, thank you. Now I'd like to think a little bit about Inside Buffalo. And I've got this question for you. To me, what I liked about the documentary is the intersection of voices that you bring to the fore in a fairly complex progressive trajectory. And one of the things that stuck with me was words by, I think it's the character's Span Watson, the person Span Watson, and I remember him saying. It was the same old America. And I think he was talking about coming back from Italy, ending up in Chicago, as I think he called himself a Southern boy, and finding the same discrimination, no honor, no recognition of having served the country. And then we jump towards the end of the documentary, and Stan says, America is a different place now. We have a new America. And of course, then, you know, we see the inauguration of Barack Obama, his speech. Your documentary came out in 2016, correct?
2010,
even, okay. So now, you know, a few years later, we are reeling still from the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Jacob Blake, and many, many others. How do you see today the oscillation between the same old and the aspiration for the new?
Oh yeah, this is a very great question. And also talking about those veterans, you made my heart cry because those gentlemen that I had the opportunity to interview, they passed away in the last 7 years. And I was really lucky to intercept their stories. And actually, we are running this conversation some days after Veterans Day. And so my thoughts are going also to them and to their families. So thank you so much to mention them and to mention their story. About their reaction, how Espen Watson could tell if after also the tragic event of George Floyd and many other things that are still unbroken and broken, of course, in the country. I'm sure that they basically were referring to a time in which racial laws and sometimes, by the way, segregation laws and code were active in the United States. This doesn't mean that changing or dismantle the racial law you can dismantle immediately how the society thinks and how a society operates. So they were, in one sense, for me, pioneer also in the civil rights movement because their experience in the military outside, abroad, America was important. They see a different world. They see a different approach of other Caucasian in Europe. So they, in one sense, they brought back in the United States this experience, and they really support the advancement of different association for civil rights movement. And actually, in many cases, they were also members or a part of this association. So this is a great experience, but of course, the work that United States and the institution of United States have hired them, it's a lot of work.
Yeah, so the title Blaxploitalian, I need to think about it before I try to, where does it come from?
Yeah, some scholars hate this title because they say me, no, it's so strange, is a mess title. And basically I wanted to mix an important American film genre called the blaxploitation that was very popular and huge during the 70s with the word Italian. We were talking in the documentary of different things, but we want to create a catchy title to use for explain much more better this documentary that basically tells 100 years of blackness in the Italian cinema. And actually, this year also passed away one of the most important African-American director. It was John Van Peebles. That was maybe one of the most successful director of the blaxploitation, that even it's a very tough, or sometimes people love film genre. In particular, it was important because created a movement in America of Black filmmaker who were creator, sometimes producer, and sometimes also distributor. And actually they made a lot of money doing this film. So they created an idea that was possible to talk about Black stories, having an audience and having success.
Yeah, and so thinking about this a little bit more broadly, and I understand the topic of the documentary, of course, but thinking about this more broadly and thinking about your experience as a filmmaker who lives, on both sides of the Atlantic, how do you feel international audiences engage with the representation of Afro-Italian experiences? Is there a growing understanding in your mind that these experiences open up huge landscapes and problems and issues that are related not only to the African diaspora, but also the Italian diaspora that has, more for the number of Italians who emigrated between 1880 and 1980 is staggering. So how do you think the global understanding of this is moving forward?
Yeah, it's very difficult because also a part of my work is to make sure and share story about contemporary Italy, and particularly diversity in contemporary Italy. So I know the difficulty to make understand that Italy change not only inside the country, but sometimes abroad the country, because sometimes there is much more stereotype about how is the composition of Italy from abroad than from inside the country. And sometimes a lot of Italian descendants born in Brazil, in Canada, or in the United States have an imaginary of Italy. But we have also to say that this imaginary of the contemporary society of Italy sometimes is not really clear and is not very realistic, because came from the imaginary of the media, in particular the film that has been made in the 70s, in the 80s, or in the 90s that are still popular right now. And sometimes contemporary filmmakers are not representing the reality of the country. So this creates a sort of short circuit in understanding the diversity of Italy. And it's the same for any Italians, because basically other European countries, but also African countries right now have a generation of Asian African. But when we still look from outside their society through their films or their story, we have a lot of stereotypes in imagining their society.
Well, then this leads me to my next question, and maybe I should say that my own positioning drives that question. But leaving that aside, we talk about Italian film, but really, is that a misnomer? Should we rather talk about Rome's film industry, and what does that mean?
Yeah, Italian film industry, or the film industry that there is in Italy, I think needs to develop much more to give much more space to different voices and different stories. So it's still an industry in which it's really difficult to have a real diverse environment, especially behind the scene. So that's I'm really involving since 4 years to create a networking to give and to promote the value of diversity behind the scene, supporting creators, digital creators, screenplayer to be much more known inside the network. And of course, the storytelling of the nation is a storytelling that could be really really rich if the film industry is able to connect with this diverse talent, and also with the diverse content of the Italian history. I'll make you an example. I recently supported a young Black Italian woman, she's a screenplayer and filmmaker too, to realize a short film about an unknown story of the Renaissance in Italy. That is the story of the Duke of Florence, Alexander de' Medici, that he was supposed to be the son of an African servant, an African woman who came to work at household and housemaid at the de' Medici family. And there are a lot of stories that are connected to the Italian past of diversity and also of encounter of Africans. So we don't need to wait for the Hotel of Shakespeare to understand how diverse was Italy since the Roman Empire.
Thank you. So this moves us into our next question, 18 Ius Solis. Italian citizenship laws created situations that we, you know, from the other side of the ocean and the continent away, but in a border town like San Diego, could perhaps compare to those of our undocumented students. Do you think this is a fair comparison in your mind, or is it a stretch?
No, I think it works. Because of course we are lucky. We are not lawyers. I'm saying I appreciate the work of lawyers, but we are not talking about people who are technically born in United States, and so they are American or not, or in the case of Italy, they are technically born in Italy, but their parents have not Italian passports, so they can't be Italian. We are talking about, as a sense of humanities, we are talking about what is the concept of citizen and citizenship. And historically, until maybe 2 centuries ago, was not having a passport, was basically, even you were diverse ethnically or by religion, was raising in a community and having a sense of belonging of this community. And this was recognized by the community. So basically we have to understand that also in the United States, also in America, there are, and also in many other countries of the world, there are a lot of young kids that are born or they were brought in many countries since they were 1 year or 2 years old, and now they are 20, and they are not citizens of those countries. Sometimes they have to apply for a visa, or sometimes they are living as undocumented because also a visa is denied to them. But they are citizens because they are a part of those community. Sometimes they only speak the language of this place and they have only friends there. So for this reason, we need to reevaluate what does it mean really to be a citizen in a country.
How do you see the conversation evolving in Italy right now?
Unfortunately, the documentary has been made 10 years ago, and actually I'm trying to do a follow-up with a short documentary that I'm filming in New York, raising the story of one of the people that I interviewed 10 years ago, because he moved from Italy to New York. He went to serve the US Navy, he became American, and he's still not Italian citizen, even he was born and raised in Rome. So I'm doing this work because after 10 years I made a documentary, and after 8 years then there was the hope that things were changing. Nothing changed. And actually with the current issues and topic and emergency of COVID and other political emergency that are saying that they have in Italy, I'm very pessimistic, and I'm not sure that maybe before 2025 or 26, the Italian government will deal with this topic, granting a reform of citizenship.
So on that note, I'm going to pass on to perhaps a couple of more personal questions, if you are willing.
Yeah, sure.
Given that, you know, the personal is the political after all. You lived like me, you know, we live in two different countries. So Bologna and New York City, how do you relate to these two spaces and how they relate to you? And I'm choosing these two, but of course you could also speak about Ghana. The only reason I didn't bring it up is because I was trying to connect where you are now to the Italy you talk about.
Yeah, and when you said before that I'm transatlantic, actually I was also thinking on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean, that is a part of Africa, and so I was thinking also the part of Ghana that basically in the last 4 years is a part in which I try to go very often, because I have the interest to spend much more, and maybe the part of the rest of my life between United States and Ghana, and sometimes Italy, because I experienced a lot in Italy, and for me Italy remained the most important country that gave me a lot, but also I wanted to expand much more the horizon of my lives. And so basically living between two different continents, or 3 different continents, as you can imagine, is a huge effort in terms of energy, money, and sometimes time consuming, but it's very exciting, and I think it will be much more common for many generations to come in these decades, because especially for those who work inside the humanities or the art, will be much more normal to live or to try to have different spaces in different parts of the world. Also because we are lucky also in this case, we are facing a new generation of interracial and diverse artists and professionals in the humanities, in their arts, with different backgrounds, and I'm sure that they will try to experience their lives and their jobs in different spaces. So the transnationality and the spatiality and open spaces, I think will be a paradigm of this century.
Absolutely. And so talking about this and the diverse artists, your online profile says that your mother is a Sephardic Jew from Bologna. Have you ever thought of exploring that side of your heritage and the untold stories that still haunt Italy's?
Actually, yeah. I decided with the COVID, because I spent more time with my parents in Bologna. Actually, right now my parents moved since 15 years from Bologna to Ferrara, and the Jewish community of my mom is in Ferrara. And I experienced a lot, and I spent a lot of time in the last 5 years sometimes with members of this community. So I really want to develop a project about the Jewish community of Ferrara, because actually it's one of the oldest community in Italy. And for many things is one of the most famous, also thanking the work of the writer who wrote Il Giardino dei Finzi Contini. I'm referring to Giorgio Bassani. It's an important book, and also they made a film after, I think Vittorio De Sica was the director of the film. So my idea was to try to make a documentary that can try to explain much more about what does it mean to be Jewish in Italy, but also try to explain much more about this community, because the community of Ferrara represents in one sense one of the community that are dying in Italy, because there are few members. Most of Jewish in Italy are living in Rome and Milan, and those who came from a small city and small community, they move abroad Italy. So sometimes are in Israel, in France, or so. I would like to intercept this moment of this community.
And so you already jumped into my next question, because I was going to ask you, what are your upcoming projects? So you already talked about one.
Yeah, it's this one. And of course, this is a sort of family project, by the way. Even I can be helpful for the community of Ferrara. And the other most ambitious project, and is a project in which I try, of course, to networking also with university, with also Art and Humanities Center. It's a very ambitious project. It's a documentary about Africans who were living during the Renaissance in Europe. So I just started to film some interview, and I start to film in particular in city like Venice and Florence, and I will go to Lisbon next month, arts and monuments, because there are a lot of monuments, painting, in which are portrayed Africans who were there, and they were there in the 14th, 15th, and 16th century. And so through their stories, who were this person, why were portrayed in this famous painting of Mantegna, Carpaccio. In Carpaccio, I went in Venice, the museum, and there is a beautiful painting of Carpaccio with a black gondolier. And who was this gondolier? And who were the servants who are in the Basilica of Frari, the 4 Africans, or the Black Moors that are in the doors of Venice. So it's a very ambitious documentary that will chronicles the story of Africans who were in Europe, not only as a servant, but also diplomats and travelers. How started slavery in Europe and where they are located. And this is, I think, will be very it's a very amount of efforts in this moment of networking and funds the work, but it's very ambitious because I want to dismantle this idea that Africans and the Black diaspora are in Europe only in the last 40 years as immigrants, or they were just slaves. No, they were since the Roman Empire. There are different stories, and a way to dismantle this idea is to bring back this story that, by the way, this story were not only written, but are in the street, are in the museum, are in the building, through the art and the monuments.
Absolutely. And I think that women may have also quite an important space in this landscape. And my brain is just teeming now with ideas as you were talking about Venice and the stories, the histories, particularly in painting and representations in the city of Venice. So I'm sure this is a very rich and a very needed project. I wish you the best with it. And
thank you. I need it.
Absolutely. And I just want to take this opportunity to thank you for being here, for your patience and eloquence in answering all our questions, and arrivederci.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Arrivederci.